With the impact of the economic situation in our communities and the disparities that go on in result of people having problems with their social conduct and abilities, there's always going to be a problem in relationship to how we are able to identify with servicing individuals who need help. We're going to be discussing this particular issue with a group that has really come together more specifically to address the problems that women have in relationship to domestic violence. We're here now with Ms. Asia Smith, who is the founder of pt1.mpg, which is a social services program, and Ms. Dawn James, who is the Director of Public Safety and a first responder for the Irvington Police Department. Thank you very much for the two of you to be able to come in and help me as a male in this situation that we have in our communities and what's really going on, nationally in regard to people who are losing their jobs and the kinds of burdens that really occur, especially for men, and knowing what we go through in regard to even just trying to be accepted in society, and then how the breakdown of family really is the result of the problems that we go through. Your program specifically identifies to ways in which it can help people who are going through domestic violence situations. Asia, do us a favor and share with us exactly what gave your program the incentive to really come together so that it can work.
Okay, well, first again, thank you for having us on your show. One of the things that we like to discuss, yes, domestic violence is a very prevalent issue. In fact, 1 in 4 women will be victims of domestic violence in her lifetime. That's over 6 million women report every year of being victims. Those are just the reported statistics. And so this is a case, and these are situations that is far greater than we know. I think most people think about, domestic violence as being an issue that only happens in relationships or behind closed doors. But as we see with the recent Monica Paul slaying in Montclair at the YMCA, you had the gentleman who threw his baby off of into the Raritan River. So these issues are now spilling over into the community, and so domestic violence does affect us all directly and indirectly. So we decided that, as an overcomer myself, I don't call myself a survivor, because there is another level beyond surviving of domestic violence. It is devastating to be assaulted or abused by someone that you love, someone that you trust.
And especially when you can't turn to someone to help you.
Absolutely. And because of that, I understand how so many women feel trapped, because again, we do have our families and we have our friends, but people have different expectations of us. And then in addition to that, the embarrassment, the guilt, the shame, the fear of even going forward to talk about it is a whole nother set of problems. And so Purple Rain, of course, was birthed out of the cries of millions of women around the world, particularly in underserved communities of color. And so the name, of course, I would like to just explain why we chose such a phenomenal name as Purple Rain. As most people know, the color purple represents royalty. It represents power and love. But sadly, it is also the color of domestic violence. The word REIGN is an acronym, R.E.I.G.N, which stands for Restoration, Empowerment, Integrity, Grace, and Nobility. So there is life after domestic violence, and there is definitely love after abuse. So we want to empower individuals, not just women, but men. Men are also victims of domestic violence. Whether it hurts or not, it is still considered domestic violence. Unfortunately, 85% of the cases are against women. So our organization has a specific concentration on assisting women and children.
Well, when I listen to Purple Rain, I think of the Girls
Prince.
Cry.
Yes,
and not just to the extent of Prince, but the whole attitude, especially even with now the new Tyler Perry movie that has come out, talking about black women and the result of many of the things that you just shared with us that are real life. And some of the things that are affecting us in regard to what do we do if we ever got to that situation. Involved with law enforcement, is there a really escalated number that's really becoming part or apparent in our community, and that at one time really seemed to be something that was really just portrayed in movies?
Yes, there is a large amount of cases, especially in the urban community, As a first responder, I get to see firsthand or what the effects that domestic violence has on the family. With the children, a lot of incidents are taking place in front of children, mostly our young males. And there is a greater number of, twice the number of males who witness, domestic violence. They're going to repeat that pattern as they become adults. And as a first responder, I get to see the households, the interior, the makeup, the breakdown, whether they are one-parent households, whether they are being raised by their siblings, raised by their another guardian, a friend of a friend. And I'm able to see or try to analyze what avenue they can take as far as help.
Socially, when it comes down to the conduct that many of us have in regard to how it becomes a difficult task, because there aren't many resources available to share with us exactly what good therapy can be. Your approach is pretty much on a grassroots level.
Absolutely. We do understand the dynamics of abuse, and when you look at it in the context of saving lives, there are so many victims and survivors that are financially and economically dependent on their batterers. So therefore, it makes leaving and accessing services a lot more difficult than we think. And, I often hear people that don't think that they've been abused or don't think that it's somebody that they know that has ever been in an abusive relationship will say things like, well, why doesn't she leave? Why is it this and why is it that? First of all, I always say that unless leaving comes with a facelift, and, relocation services for all of your family and friends, because again, people think that it's just once you leave the property or the household that it's no longer going to happen.
Right.
In fact, a woman is twice as likely to be killed after she leaves.
Right.
Yes, and you have to deal with so many other issues such as stalking, such as harassment. They know where you work, where you live, where you get your hair done, your nails done. So you have to take into consideration all those things. And so our organization, especially with Dawn's position, is making sure that we have the correct safety plans in place. You have to be very strategic about what it is that you're doing, especially when you have children involved or, the lives of other individuals. And so to create an organization that will allow access to people that cannot afford, some of the grand services of going to, let's say, a therapist or a psychologist. They may not have the financial means to even travel to certain places to get these services. So what we do is our program is mobile.
Right.
We go to where the
them.
services are
Makes it
needed.
a lot easier for them.
It's best to be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Dawn, and one of those points that we're making too is that your background, and like you're saying, where you have been on location and have been able to observe and understand exactly the specifics in regard to identifying to ways that people can find improvement, is really an asset to the program.
Yes, it is an asset to the program. You're able to follow up with that individual. I work here in the Township of Irvington. I get to know the community on a name basis. So you're able to follow with the individual. They can always come to me. I'm easily accessible. I have my patches on my sleeve. So I'm always available. And I think that's one of the biggest assets that I can provide for anyone in the community, especially here. Being able to provide safety planning, being able to, if they can't go get a birth certificate, being able to give them the steps to where they can go get a birth certificate, teaching them how to gather up certain things,
Evidence
medical,
collection,
right,
too.
medical papers and the children's documents, keepsakes, and stuff like that. Being accessible
Beforehand,
like that, right,
you want to make
before it
sure that they
happens.
do this stuff
Before it happens.
because when you leave, there's one thing that people don't, consider. You don't have time in some
You don't.
cases to pack a bag, to
Right.
take clothing. Some women leave with the clothes on their backs, and so we often let women know, take some of these documents and put them in either a safety deposit box or at a trusted friend's house so that
gonna say
you
that.
can go and access, because you will need to fill out a restraining order. You will need, documentation. So that's another thing that we do as well. We
Right.
assist individuals in the area of orders of protection. And a lot of times we often think, well, I can't afford afford an attorney. I can't afford to do this. But we partner with various agencies that offer pro bono services for individuals that are in the process of custody, divorce hearings, as well as restraining orders and temporary restraining orders.
And also the township offers that as well, an advocate in the court.
Every township or just Irvington?
Every township offers
Okay.
it, and as an advocate in the court.
As an advocate in court. Well,
Right.
looking at it from that
So-
perspective, when we talk about how the relationship with law enforcement is really a good partnership.
Absolutely.
And how it can be
Absolutely.
effective and where it works for improvement and where it's not intimidating. Because
No,
in most
no.
cases it is.
Very.
But what about the naive individual? What about the woman who, is kind of like, what do they call it? MS, MPS, what do they call it? Okay, guys. I'm having
Well, I'll
one of
help
those
you out.
senior moments.
I will definitely help you out.
What is it called?
Well, one thing there's a quote that we actually that I love, and it's by Susan B. Anthony, and it says, "The fact is, women are in chains, and their servitude is all the more debasing because they do not realize it." So what that simply states is, a lot of times we can be in abusive situations and
not
don't even know it.
And not know
Because people think, because it's not physical or it's not sexual abuse, but what about the emotional, the mental, the verbal abuse?
And
comes
I
into
guess,
it?
I understand
too.
it. I
Right.
understand that, and I'm not in the position to debate because we're
No,
working
it's
together on this, but
Right.
from a guy, perspective,
Absolutely.
there's PMS. That's the word that I was looking
Oh, okay.
for. You have some women that have an incredible attitude, and it seems like no matter what you try to do to be right, there's something wrong. And in many instances, it gets to a point where it's uncontrollable.
Well, what we do, and we say this because we also work with men, and we love the work that we do with men, because I say this to a man or to a woman: if you are in a situation where it is becoming disrespectful and volatile, or it can